This is Chapter 7, The New Teacher. Reina and Destiny walked down the empty hallway. It had been a pep rally and then a football game, so everyone else was out of the building, presumably enjoying being dominated by a nearby local team. Football was one of the only sports Reina wasn't allowed to play by the lack of virtue of her vagina. Even Liara and Amelia were at the football game. Amelia to support her friends who were still on the cheerleading team, and Liara to study human reactions, sort of an anti-example for her current AI boyfriend plans. All the teachers love football, so it was a surprise to hear what sounded like cursing coming from Mrs. Crenshaw's history classroom. Ms. Crenshaw loved football. She loved the teenage children hurting each other. She loved the trash talk. She loved the fact that no one could reasonably attribute the incredibly vicious and hurtful things she said to a little old lady. There's no way Ms. Crenshaw would miss a football game and a chance to shout invective at minorities. So, who was in her room? The teenagers crept closer, inching towards the open door. Inside, there was a sound of something tearing. They peered around the large door frame that all schools seem legally required to have. Inside was a small but solid black man standing on Mrs. Crenshaw's desk. He was wearing comfortable but professional clothes and had a hand on one of the posters on the wall. It had torn as he was trying to remove it, but he didn't have a free hand to unhook it as one of his hands was holding him up. "Should have moved the desk closer to the wall first," remarked Reina without thinking. "Thank you," the man said, with only slight indignation, turning towards them before breaking into a grin. "Sorry, students. I thought you were adults." He smiled warmly, all trace of irritation gone. "Could you maybe give me a hand here?" Destiny moved immediately to support him, while Reina shoved the desk closer to the wall with him on it. The whole seemed thing like it was intended to toss the man into Destiny's arms, but the two males narrowly stayed perched where they were. Destiny glared at Reina. "Maybe wait until the person on top of the desk is safe before moving it?" Reina blushed as Destiny helped the man down. The teachers' chairs all had rollers, so it was a big step down. The man brushed the white dust that is ever present even in modern schools off of his black pants. "Thank you, young man," he attempted. "But what are you two still doing at the school? I understood there was a football game, and that's a serious thing around here." Destiny looked away. "Not super much for school spirit, I guess." Reina shot him a look. "I've got plenty of school spirit. But they wouldn't let me play football, so I'm boycotting." The man sized them up. Okay. "And your names?" he said perfunctorily. Destiny was uncomfortable. He'd already dealt with this once today and didn't feel like doing it again. "Excuse me, sir, but what is your name? And why are you in Miss Crenshaw's class, taking stuff off of her walls?" The man looked uncomfortably between them. "Well, I guess you would have found out tomorrow anyway." Reina gasped. "Oh my God, did she die?" It wasn't an unreasonable question. She had to be in her late 70s at least. Destiny always figured she was too mean to die, and she'd kind of always been at the school. There were pictures of hers from the 80s, still grimacing out of the frame at some imagined slight and looking nearly the same. The man shook his head. "No, I hear she moved away suddenly, which is why you needed a teacher in October." He looked ruefully at the desk. "I'm Mr. Llewellyn, and I'm going to be your history teacher for the rest of the year." Reina nods. Ms. Crenshaw was always threatening to quit. Destiny turned back to Mr. Llewellyn. "And why are you taking down her posters?" Destiny looked at the posters, maybe really looked, for the very first time. They were like layers of sediment piled on top of each other. Who knew how far down they went? Mr. Llewellyn nodded. "Well, I don't want to insult a fellow educator." The teens rolled their eyes. "But some of these posters are wrong, obsolete, and some are kind of racist." Both of the teens nodded. "Yeah, that makes sense," Destiny said. Mr. Llewellyn looked stunned. "You mean you knew?" "Oh yeah," Reina said. "She was so racist." Llewellyn held up a map that had been on the wall for years. "This map shows Africa smaller than the United States," Destiny gaped. "You mean Africa's bigger?" "Yes, much bigger. Much bigger." And he gestured to the poster he'd torn when he was climbing down. "And this guy fought for the wrong side in the Civil War." Destiny nodded. "Nathan Bedford Forrest. We had a whole week on him. Miss Crenshaw said it was because we couldn't forget our history." Reina said, "But we're pretty sure she was into him. She would get all hot and bothered when she read his speech." All three shivered in a moment of silence. Finally, Mr. Llewellyn turned back to Destiny. You said she's always threatening to leave? Destiny tries to remember. Yeah, something about Acapulco? Reina laughs, but is thoughtful. Yeah, she said Mexicans there were always polite and spoke English. We tried to tell her that was just on TV and maybe vacation resorts, but she claimed she knew more than a... Destiny put a hand on Reina's arm. You don't have to. But I do. You know the nicest thing she ever said to me? Destiny shakes his head, the new teacher forgotten. It was a school dance last year. I went with my cousin Angel because he didn't have... Angel, because he didn't have a girlfriend and I really wanted to go. Reina sighed. Miss Crenshaw was chaperoning because of course she was. And she saw me and she was clearly surprised to see me in a dress. I usually don't care how I look, but I'd spent hours getting my hair done and my makeup and everything. And you know what she said? She waited and Destiny just looked sad. She said I looked spectacular. She took all my effort, all my work, and made it into a lame fucking racial slur. Reina was on the edge of tears, and Destiny hugged her, which she relaxed into for a moment and then pushed away. She turned away from them both and stood by the door looking out. Sorry, Mr. Llewellyn, you got me on an emotional day. Don't expect this level of intimacy and introspection generally, she said with a note of irony in her voice. Destiny saw recognition and frustration in Mr. Llewellyn's face. Noted, he said quietly. I can't begin to understand what you've been through, but I promise I'll try to be better than Ms. Crenshaw, was it? Destiny nodded. You can't be much worse, Mr. L. You want some help with the posters? Mr. Llewellyn shook his head. I think I'm done with these racist posters for today. I'm going to call it a day and deal with all this tomorrow. But tomorrow's Saturday, said Reina, looking back and firmly in control again. It is, but there's no chance any kids will hear me swearing at Mrs. Crenshaw, he said. And both teens laughed. It was freeing. When they left a few minutes later, it felt like some sort of catharsis. Maybe this year wouldn't suck completely. They didn't notice the small shadow hiding behind the trash can as they left the room. It's chapter 7. One of the more chaptery chapters that we've seen so far.